A tragic incident that really gripped Canada back in 2007.
Yeah.
The death of Robert Dziekanski at Vancouver International Airport.
Right.
We're going through excerpts from the official inquiry report led by Commissioner Thomas Braidwood.
Okay.
And this report doesn't just lay out the events.
Right.
It digs into airport procedures, the RCMP response,
Yeah.
and asks some really tough questions about what went wrong.
For sure.
Our mission today is to try to understand how this could have happened and what we can learn from it.
Absolutely. It's a case that forces us to confront the complexities of law enforcement, communication, and how systems can sometimes fail individuals in the most heartbreaking ways.
Yeah, let's start with Robert Dziekanski himself.
Okay.
He was a Polish citizen,
Right.
traveling internationally for the very first time,
Wow.
coming to live with his mother in Canada.
Okay.
And you can imagine the mix of emotions, excitement, nervousness,
Yeah.
maybe even a little bit of fear.
Absolutely. And adding to those natural anxieties, the report highlights he'd been experiencing panic attacks and unusual behavior leading up to the trip.
Oh,
The night before he left, he was even clinging to a radiator.
really?
Clearly, he was already under significant stress.
So not your typical traveler starting out their journey.
No.
Now, his flights from Katowice to Frankfurt and then on to Vancouver
Yeah.
were uneventful.
Okay.
But when he landed in Vancouver at 3:15 p.m. on October 13th,
Right.
things took a turn.
Okay.
He went through immigration just fine.
Okay.
But then for 5 hours and 14 minutes, he basically disappears.
Wow.
There's no record of him anywhere.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine being his mother, Miss Jasowski, waiting in the arrivals area?
I can't imagine.
The report really emphasizes her growing desperation.
Right.
She arrived hours early,
Yeah.
eager to see her son,
Right.
but couldn't even get into the secure customs hall.
Wow.
And when she asked for help, airport staff couldn't provide any information about arriving passengers.
Oh, that's terrible.
Mhm.
It really exposes a gap in the airport's support system at the time. They were focused on tourism information,
Right.
not necessarily on the needs of arriving passengers or those waiting for them.
So while his mother is frantically searching,
Yeah.
what's Robert doing during those missing hours?
Unfortunately, the report doesn't give us a definitive answer. Security footage picks him up again at 9:25 p.m.
Okay.
But those hours in between are a mystery.
Right.
He could have been lost, overwhelmed by the new environment, unable to communicate.
Yeah.
It's easy to imagine his anxiety getting worse by the minute.
Alone, in a foreign country,
Yeah.
not speaking the language.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the fear and frustration building up.
And the report suggests that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
Witnesses describe him talking to himself, sweating profusely, even banging on glass doors.
Oh, no.
It seems he was desperately trying to get back to the public area.
So you have this escalating sense of distress. This brings us to the International Reception Lounge around 12:40 a.m.,
Okay.
where things take an even more serious turn.
That's right. Security footage shows Robert throwing a chair,
Oh, my God.
using his suitcases to build a sort of barrier.
Really?
It's clear he's not in a good state of mind, and what's interesting is that a limousine driver, Lorne Meltzer, was there
Okay.
and actually tried to de-escalate the situation.
He sounds like he was trying to do the right thing.
He absolutely was.
Yeah.
He recognized Robert was in distress
Yeah.
and even called 911,
Oh.
but was put on hold.
Oh, no.
With things getting worse, airport security finally had to call for help from the RCMP,
Oh, wait.
the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who are the federal police force in Canada.
And that call would have huge repercussions.
Yeah.
It's important for us to understand that the RCMP officers who responded to the airport that night
Right.
were going into a situation with limited information.
Yes, they were told about a man throwing luggage and possibly intoxicated.
Right.
However, as they were on their way, they received additional information, which the inquiry later found was exaggerated and inaccurate.
So right from the start, their perception of the situation could have been skewed.
Absolutely. And when they arrived at the International Reception Lounge,
Yeah.
the report notes they didn't speak to any of the civilians present who could have given them more context.
Right.
They went straight into law enforcement mode.
With communication already a major barrier because Robert didn't speak English.
Right.
What happened when they finally encountered him?
The initial interaction was actually described as calm.
Okay.
Robert seemed to be complying with his hands at his sides.
Okay.
However, and this is key,
Yeah.
there's a discrepancy between what the officers reported and what's seen on a video taken by a bystander named Paul Pritchard.
This video became a crucial piece of evidence, didn't it?
Absolutely. It raises serious questions about the level of threat the officers actually faced.
Right.
And whether their subsequent actions were justified.
And those actions, of course, involve the use of a taser, which is where we'll pick things up in the next part of our deep dive.
So we're at this critical point where the RCMP officers are now face-to-face with Robert Dziekanski.
Yeah.
And as we discussed, the information they had received was, let's say,
Right.
less than accurate.
Right.
This brings us to the infamous taser incident.
The inquiry really dives deep into this moment.
Oh, wow.
It seems that Constable Millington
Right.
deployed the taser not once, not twice,
Oh, wow.
but 5 times
5 times.
in a span of just 31 seconds.
Oh, my gosh.
5 times.
Yeah, and that's where the Pritchard video becomes so vital.
Right?
The officers claim that Robert picked up a stapler
Okay.
and advanced towards them aggressively,
Okay.
justifying their use of force.
Right.
But when you look at the video
Okay.
and the expert analysis presented to the inquiry,
Right.
it tells a different story.
It's almost unbelievable how much a single piece of video footage can change our understanding of an event.
I know.
What exactly did the video show?
Well, it seems that Robert did pick up a stapler,
Okay.
but there's no indication that he was brandishing it in a threatening way or that he stepped towards the officers with it.
Okay.
It appears he was simply holding it.
So the perceived threat that the officers described
Right.
seems to be contradicted by the video evidence.
Exactly, and that raises serious questions about whether the use of the taser was justified in the first place.
Yeah.
Let alone 5 deployments.
Right.
Remember, this was a man who was already clearly distressed,
Right.
didn't speak English, and was in a completely unfamiliar environment.
It's a tragic turn of events, and sadly, this is just the beginning.
Right.
Shortly after being handcuffed,
Right.
Robert loses consciousness,
Oh my gosh.
turns blue, and stops breathing.
Yes. It quickly escalated into a medical emergency.
And this is where the airport's own response comes under scrutiny.
Right.
The inquiry discovered that despite airport policy dictating immediate dispatch
Okay.
for a Code 3 medical emergency,
Right.
the airport response coordinator actually chose to override that policy.
Wow.
Wait, so even though there was a policy in place for these situations,
Right.
someone decided to ignore it.
Yeah.
What was the reasoning behind that?
The coordinator claimed that dispatching emergency services to this particular incident would leave the airport vulnerable and unable to respond to another potential emergency.
But wouldn't someone in medical distress be their top priority?
Yeah.
Seems like a strange decision.
The inquiry certainly thought so.
Yeah.
They found his reasoning to be flawed and criticized his decision to override the established protocol,
Right.
concluding it was an improper action
Yeah.
that directly impacted the timely arrival of medical help.
It's a stark reminder that even when policies exist,
Right.
they're only as effective as the people who implement them.
Absolutely. Now, even with the medical intervention,
Yeah.
sadly, Robert Dziekanski did not survive.
And this leads us to one of the most debated aspects of the case,
Right.
the cause of death.
Exactly, even with the autopsy and expert testimonies. There was never a clear consensus on what ultimately killed him.
Right, because even with the autopsy and expert testimonies,
Yeah.
there was never a clear consensus on what ultimately killed him.
Exactly. The autopsy revealed that Robert had an enlarged heart,
Okay.
which is a pre-existing condition that could lead to sudden death.
Right.
However, medical opinions were divided.
Okay.
Some experts attributed the death to the taser use,
Right.
while others pointed to the pre-existing heart condition
Okay.
or the physical restraint itself
Right.
as contributing factors.
So even with all the medical evidence, we're left with uncertainty.
Yes, and this ambiguity only fueled the public outcry and demands for a thorough investigation.
Yeah.
Now, adding fuel to the fire was the way the RCMP handled the situation in the immediate aftermath.
From what I understand, the RCMP's initial statements did little to calm public concerns.
That's putting it mildly.
Okay.
The inquiry was highly critical of their initial media response.
Yeah.
Their statements contained inaccuracies and lacked transparency, which understandably further eroded public trust.
It almost seemed like they were trying to control the narrative rather than being open and honest about what happened.
The inquiry certainly pointed to a lack of transparency in those crucial early hours and days.
Right.
Remember, this was a time before body cameras were widespread.
Right.
So the Pritchard video played a pivotal role in contradicting the initial accounts given by the RCMP.
Right.
It became a case study in the importance of independent evidence and civilian oversight.
It's clear that this case goes beyond just a single incident. It exposed systemic issues
Right.
within both the airport and the RCMP.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what did the Braidwood Inquiry conclude?
After months of investigation,
Yeah.
reviewing mountains of evidence and hearing testimonies from dozens of witnesses,
Right.
the inquiry delivered its final report, and its findings were damning.
Wow.
They concluded that the actions of the RCMP officers were not justified.
So after all the back and forth, all the conflicting accounts, the inquiry firmly placed the blame on the RCMP.
Yes.
That must have been a huge moment for Robert Dziekanski's family
I can imagine.
and for the public who had been demanding answers.
It validated their concerns and sent a strong message that excessive force would not be tolerated.
Yeah.
But the inquiry went beyond simply assigning blame.
Okay.
They also made a series of comprehensive recommendations
Right.
aimed at preventing similar tragedies from happening again.
So it wasn't just about holding people accountable for the past,
Yeah,
but also about making real change for the future.
exactly. They called for improved police training,
Okay.
better communication protocols, especially in situations involving language barriers,
Right.
and a greater emphasis on de-escalation techniques.
Right.
There was also a strong push for more civilian oversight and independent investigations of police-involved incidents.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Having that external objective perspective
Right.
can help ensure a fair and impartial investigation.
And the recommendations didn't stop with the RCMP. The inquiry also looked at the actions of the Canada Border Services Agency
Okay.
and the Vancouver Airport Authority.
So they recognized that multiple systems had failed in this situation.
Absolutely. They identified areas where their policies and procedures needed improvement,
Yeah.
especially when it came to supporting non-English speaking passengers.
Right.
Think about it. You're arriving in a foreign country,
Yeah.
perhaps for the first time, and you can't communicate.
Right.
That's a vulnerable situation.
Yeah.
And the airport has a responsibility to ensure those passengers are adequately supported.
Right.
The inquiry made it clear that they had fallen short in this case.
And who knows, maybe if things had been different, if Robert had been able to communicate,
Yeah.
if he'd received more timely assistance,
Right.
maybe this tragedy could have been avoided.
It's a possibility.
It's a heartbreaking thought.
It is. But it's important to remember that the purpose of an inquiry like this
Right.
isn't just to dwell on the past, but to learn from it and prevent similar tragedies in the future.
Yeah, it's hard to grasp the magnitude of this tragedy
I know.
and the rippling effects it had.
Right.
Robert Dziekanski's death became a symbol
Right.
of the need for greater accountability and transparency within law enforcement.
Yeah.
And it sparked a national conversation about how we, as a society, treat vulnerable individuals.
This wasn't just a story about one man's unfortunate encounter with the police. It forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about systemic biases,
Right.
communication breakdowns, and the use of force.
Right.
It challenged us to ask ourselves,
Yeah.
could we be doing better?
Right.
And how do we prevent something like this from ever happening again?
And this is where the Braidwood Inquiry's recommendations become so important.
Yeah.
They didn't just play fingers.
Right.
They offered concrete steps to address the issues they uncovered.
Their recommendations were far-reaching, touching on everything from police training and de-escalation techniques to the airport's responsibility to provide support for non-English speaking travelers.
Wow.
They called for a shift in mindset,
Yeah.
a move towards a more compassionate and understanding approach to law enforcement, especially in situations where individuals are clearly in distress.
The inquiry also emphasized the importance of civilian oversight,
Right.
ensuring that investigations into police conduct are impartial and transparent.
It's about building trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve.
Right.
When incidents like this occur,
Yeah.
it's crucial that the investigation is seen as fair and unbiased.
Right.
Public confidence in the system is essential.
This deep dive has been incredibly insightful, but also deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
It's easy to think this wouldn't happen here,
Right,
but
yeah.
this wouldn't happen to me.
Yeah.
But Robert Dziekanski's story serves as a stark reminder that tragedies can occur anywhere,
It's true.
to anyone.
Yeah.
It reminds us that we must constantly strive for a more just and equitable society.
It also highlights the power of a single voice.
Right.
Think about Paul Pritchard,
Yeah.
the bystander who filmed the incident. His decision to record that video changed everything.
Right.
It contradicted the official narrative and forced a re-examination of the events.
It's a testament to the fact that we all have a role to play
Absolutely.
in holding those in power accountable.
Yes.
We can't just be passive observers.
You have to speak up,
Right.
challenge injustice,
Yeah.
and demand better.
Robert Dziekanski's story is a tragedy, but it also offers a powerful lesson.
It does.
It reminds us that we can't be complacent.
We have to keep learning
Right.
and keep pushing for change.
We must continue to push for reforms, for better training, for greater accountability within our systems.
Yeah.
And we must always strive to treat each other with compassion and understanding,
Right.
recognizing the inherent dignity of every human being, regardless of language or background.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a challenging journey, but an important one. We hope this episode encourages you to reflect on the issues we've discussed and to consider what role you can play in creating a more just and equitable world.
Remember, even small actions can make a difference.
Yes.
Stay informed
And stay engaged.
and never stop questioning.
Until next time.